Welcome back to the channel, folks. My name's Shane. In today's video, we're checking out the Sony A7C. Last time I was at this park, which was only a couple of weeks ago, I was testing out the brand new Panasonic GH5 Mark II, and then it died an untimely death. The wind kicked up out of nowhere, the tripod fell, smashed the selfie screen off, and I was devastated. But it really got me thinking that I finally need a camera with great autofocus. And you know, as Panasonic are still making strides on getting better and better, Panasonic cameras are still best if you're using manual focus or if you're behind the camera. Now, I trust the autofocus so much more on the Panasonic S5 and on the Panasonic GH5 Mark II over any of their other cameras. It's not even close. It's so much better, but it's not Sony good. And part of me died inside seeing the price of the Sony A7C and how little feature set it had. But the thing that it does have is functionality for the purpose that I want it for, which is why I ended up getting this. Just to let you know, I'm going to be shooting the entirety of this video on the Sony A7C, and anytime you see the camera, I'm going to be using the Panasonic S5. Now, massive thank you to the iPhondo channel for Rook. He uses this Sony G Master 24mm f1.4 lens for a lot of his beach shots, and I loved the visual of it. So that's what I'll be using. It's the only lens that I currently have, because the lenses are as expensive as the camera. But this is what I wanted, a wide angle lens that looked great, gave me some nice background separation, had instantaneous autofocus. So I haven't done any customized settings to this camera. So what you're seeing is straight out of camera on the standard picture profile. This is the big problem I had with the Sony cameras. It was either you go up to something like the A7S III for the big feature set and the bigger price tag, or the Sony FX3, or you buy their entry-level cameras that have a whole lot less features. But there's two main reasons I went for this other than just great autofocus. The second being, of course, it's got the Catalyst browse software, which gives you great stabilization. Now, I've been a huge advocate of not having to use anything to get stable footage out of your camera, but it seemed like a really great decision, especially on shoots where I might normally use a gimbal. That said though, I really feel like just for web content, this might be one of the best cameras if you need that great autofocus and if you're not too fussy about not getting the higher frame rates in 4K or those 10-bit codecs. Let's quickly talk about the ergonomics and first impressions of the Sony A7C in the hand. You know, I picked this camera up 2 or 3 times in a camera shop before I actually pulled the trigger on it over the course of maybe the last 3 months, and I hate the feel of it. The grip is awful. You're all bunched up in there right next to the lens, and in terms of ergonomics, it's by far the worst camera in my collection. I don't say collection as in like I collect cameras, but the ones that I have purchased over the years, this by far feels the worst in the hand. But the trade-off again is Catalyst browse, getting that great depth of field, and also having that great autofocus. So I thought for park shots like this and for just YouTube videos, I can get away with it, but it's not a comfortable camera in the hand. The Olympus OMD EM1 Mark II, the Panasonic GH5, or the S5 leaves this for dead in terms of straight up ergonomics. Now, the problem with the ergonomics just isn't the grip either, right? It's the button placement and the lack of function custom buttons. All things that I knew before buying this, right? Every review speaks about the ergonomics, the button placement, and the lack of custom options. If you're coming from Panasonic, it's a big step backwards, or maybe plenty of other brands out there that also offer more function buttons. But this is built to a price. It's overpriced, but again, you're getting all the stuff that just seems to work if you want to do autofocus tricks like this without anything weird happening. So if that's what you need, this is a really great choice. And for web content where most people don't even care, I think it's going to do a good job. When it comes to the Sony Catalyst software, this is the kind of stabilization you can get. I have the in-body image stabilization off altogether, so I'll be doing this in post-production, which kind of sucks. You do spend more time getting the file ready for use, but you get great stabilization and it stops you having to bring a gimbal. As long as you reframe your shot slightly so you leave a little bit more room, the crop isn't a huge deal because you do get to customize just how much of a crop and just how much stabilization you want in your shot. So this is how it looks. Hopefully it's nice and smooth just by holding my tripod. It's not a selfie stick, just out like this. Now, much like Panasonic, the Sony system has a lot of different autofocus modes, except the autofocus modes work so much better in the Sony cameras. Already, only after using it for a couple of days, I can tell you that this is a far better camera for autofocus performance. It still requires a learning curve, but all of the modes are functional. It's not like you're guessing to see which one works the best. Now, I've had a lot of success with the Panasonic cameras when it comes to autofocus, and I've also done a lot of tutorials on them on how to get the most out of them. But one of the biggest problems is sometimes if you're not, over the one area mode or whatever the case may be, it just loses you, and I don't want that to happen. One of the reasons why I wanted to get this camera, again, when I travel, I need something that I can rely on, and if this allows me to get all the shots without losing focus, I'm gonna be a happy camper. Not that I ever go camping. Now, not to rip on this selfie screen too much, but I think it's a big deal that it doesn't have a lot of touchscreen functionality. It's next to incapacitated. When you want to play a movie back, you have to keep using the center ring button on the back of the camera. What happened to just tapping the big play icon that's on screen? How can Sony not put in a touchscreen that's actually really functional? Now, it does have some touch functionality, but it's nothing like cameras that were even out in 2017. So I feel like this is a huge downgrade. But again, it's got that great autofocus and the picture quality looks insane, giving me great background separation. That's the dream, right? Getting some sort of background blur, getting great autofocus. It's functional. I hate to admit it, but it's really, really functional, except for if I want to wear sunglasses and except for if I actually want to use the touchscreen like a touchscreen. I find with the Panasonic stuff, using a combination of the hardware keys and buttons and dials mixed with the selfie screen, you can do things so quickly. It sucks, but it's good. Now, I've taken some product photography with this camera already, and the picture quality is insane. So if you're a photographer, you can get some great results out of it. Aperture priority mode is pretty much where I live on this camera to give me that depth of field, and it works extremely well. I did a Tony Northrup. I took you to the best view in Melbourne, but you can't see it. If only I had an f1.2. Now, another big reason why I wanted to go for the Sony cameras is the lens selection. Now, this is that 24mm f1.4 G Master, but I'm also looking at getting the 35mm FE 1.8. So a huge shout out to Gerald Undone for his video comparison of all the 35mm lenses. It doesn't have bad focus breathing or anything like that. So that'll be the next lens probably on the list, as well as a 50. And I'm not exactly sure which 50mm I'll go for just yet. So there's a couple of things about this camera that you need to know if you're thinking about buying one. First up, the grip is not very ergonomic whatsoever. So if that's a huge thing for you, then don't get this camera. If you're buying it for vlogging, get a little tripod, hook it up underneath and walk with it like that, and you won't have any problems. So that's not a deal breaker. I really miss not having a proper touchscreen LCD. This is more of a reference monitor. You can touch the focus, but it has very limited functionality. So if you're coming from Panasonic, that'll kill you. It's like a camera that came out in 2016 in that regard, but for what it does it extremely well. You get that full frame sensor, you get the options of great lenses and glass you can put on it. There's a couple of things that I've noticed, especially sitting here in the car while the outside is very bright. It's having a hard time compensating for my face. Sometimes it just goes dark. I've shot this a couple of times, so what I'll do, I'll overlay some of that footage on this video unless it does it again. But I think the Catalyst software is a winner if you want to be able to stabilize your footage in post. The stabilizer in the camera itself isn't great. It's nowhere even close to Panasonic or Olympus. So if you're just hoping to get great straight out of camera stabilization, it's not going to do the job. The Catalyst software is the way to go. Minus the lack of function buttons and so forth. As a run and gun camera, for what I want it for getting great autofocus, this is going to do the job. So I don't regret buying this, but it killed me to buy it because I thought I'm really downgrading over what I already had. But at the end of the day, it's not a downgrade because it works. This is going to save me time as opposed to having to come back the next day and to shoot parts of products in the park or whatever the case may be, right? So as long as I don't break this one like I did on my last camera, we should be good to go. Now, again, as I mentioned earlier, I have another camera that I haven't mentioned in this video that I'm going to do maybe a blind test comparison with this one to see if anyone can see the difference. But I think this is going to be a great addition for what I want, a great little run and gun camera that is tiny, that has a great lens on the front of it, that has impeccable autofocus, but doesn't have great auto exposure, which you could just probably hope maybe just see it there kicked in a little bit where it's sort of trying to recover now. But overall, great little camera. If you want to find out about this, I'll leave some affiliate links in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll catch you on the next video. See ya.